a bunch of questions. They look interesting. I am gonna answer them. That was the worst intro ever. Just I quit YouTube. That's it. No, fuck it. I'm leaving. Seriously, why can't I come up with a good intro? For fuck's sake.
Are you able to understand the irony of responding to the perceived political correctness of the left with exasperated reactionary hypersensitivity of your own?
Yes, your point?
How do you define right-wing? Anti SJWs often have an aversion to being labeled as right-wing, yet they regularly defend the right and bash the left. Therefore, why is being labeled right-wing a bad thing to you? And if it's because right-wing is used as a pejorative, can you not see how labeling people as SJWs or regressives is also pejorative?
Yes, you may have a point there, but unfortunately for you, it doesn't really apply to me. I don't like the terms left-wing or right-wing because they tell me nothing. They are non-descriptive terms, completely arbitrary, and the only thing that they actually tell me is where in the room a person will be sitting. That's why I'm a firm believer in horseshoe theory, especially since there is some bleed over from one side to the other. That's why I prefer things like conservative, liberal, progressive, and my own label, libertarian. As in the label I identify with, not the label that I invented.
Rather than telling people you disagree with to drink bleach, wouldn't it be more productive for you to have an actual conversation about the issues you feel matter?
You remember how it turned out last time we tried that, right?
You claim to be proponents of rational, logical, evidence-based argumentation. That's great, that's entirely laudable. But when I look at your online activity, when I look at, I don't know, for example, your Twitter feed, that's often not what I see. How do you reconcile this claim to be evidence-based and rational and logical against stuff like, oh, I was just trolling you, oh, I was just shitposting, or TLDR?
It's ironic that you bring TLDR into this because he usually gives a pretty extensive and detailed response to whatever it is that he's responding to. And that's the reason why we claim to be in favor of argumentation and logic, etc, etc. And you don't see that on Twitter. It's because Twitter is basically the text equivalent of Vine. I mean, you would be cut off before you would be able to make any real argument.
Are you aware that the ridiculous buzzwords you helped to popularize, like SJW and cuck and regressive, have all lost whatever meaning they once had and only serve now as catch-all insults and pejoratives to derail any meaningful conversation?
Mansplaining, rape culture, sexual harassment, misogyny, sexist, racist, homophobic, actual rape, figurative rape, triggering. And irony!
For the last time, what is it with you people and committing actual literal felonies?
Isn't you blaming the felonies on us? You know, isn't this kind of similar to supposedly us blaming black people for committing crimes on the fact that they're black?
In videos and in the comment sections, anti-feminists often take up the most extreme or the weakest feminist position they can find, or they just straight up misrepresent what the feminist position is. Instead, why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument you can find and really challenge yourself?
Okay, very well. I'm going to challenge the argument of reparations being justifiable for historical oppression. You see, in case you didn't know, I am Polish. Our country has been literally dismantled by the Germans and the Russians. even way before the First World War. In fact, our nation didn't exist for over 120 years and was only barely alive after the First World War. Then World War II came along and we were once again under the boot and heel of Germans and Russians. And yet, I do not have a hatred of Germany or Russia or Germans or Russians. Do you know why? It's because none of those individual Germans or Russians alive today are responsible for what happened to my ancestors 120 years ago. And if I were to act on that historical oppression of the Polish people and say, raided Germany and taken away half their land, now these Germans whom I've stolen the land from are gonna see me as the oppressive bad guy. And then they are going to use my raid against them as a justification in order to rebel and take away their land as well as some of the Polish land. And this would start getting into an infinite cycle of revenge and revenge for revenge, which was enacted for us revenge for revenge for revenge. Do you not see where this is going yet?
I am deeply concerned with male addiction rates, suicide rates, and abuse rates, because I have worked with these issues in the quote-unquote real world. Would you be willing as anti-feminists to put aside your differences with feminists for the greater good of addressing these issues, especially as the kind of solutions needed are not necessarily gendered?
Yes, I am. But again, the last time we tried that...
And if so, I would actually like you to let me know, because I'm not fucking around or presenting any gotchas here. I actually really think that we could get something done if we work together.
Try and get in contact with the Honey Badger Brigade. They're probably the biggest men's rights group that I know. And they are incredibly reasonable people. If you think you can do something, go talk to them.
What is third wave feminism?
I understand third wave feminism as an umbrella term for the movement which advocates for the rights of women, and this is important, based on the belief that the Western world is ruled by a patriarchy and that women are significantly disadvantaged in all walks of life.
And what specifically about third wave feminism do you have such a problem with?
The fact that I disagree with just about everything they're saying.
Why is it that this feminist represents all feminists, but this men's rights activist doesn't represent all men's rights activists?
Whoa, wait, sexism all of a sudden? Ladies and men are different? So we're supposed to punch men and not hit ladies and open doors for men but not ladies? Fuck you, get out of my face, you tiny piece of shit.
Because we constantly see feminists disrupting real-life events, and I don't know if it's just me, but this is literally the first time I've seen a men's rights activist bitch out over missing chicken. And if he is indeed representative of men's rights activists, then the biggest thing he's done here is bitch at a worker in McDonald's. He did not assault the cops in order to stop a feminist event discussing the high rates of suicide. So even if your point does stand that they should both be representative of each individual group, well, that's like trying to compare a KKK member to, I don't know, somebody who just... to some kid who just threw a temper tantrum and is calling people faggots left and right because he doesn't really understand what this term means.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists? Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you, even if you don't agree much?
Yes, you can ask, but don't necessarily expect that they're absolutely accurate. You can still try to explain the way somebody thinks, even though you personally don't agree with it. For example, there was a controversy a while back where the Amazing Atheist hosted an Anti SJW on one of his videos. The person in question had a kangaroo as the avatar, so I'm gonna call them Kangaroo Man. I don't really remember who they were, and I'm not their subscriber, so I'm sorry, mate. I'm too lazy to look you up. But basically, this guy has admitted that he is going to dox anyone who makes a personal attack against them. And why I don't really agree with doxing, I can understand when somebody would be making those threats, especially if they were credible. If you are going to go after them in real life, you should be expecting them to retaliate accordingly, because you are trying to ruin their life. If he has to use the threat of retaliation to get you to leave him the fuck alone, then so be it. This is basically an if you punch me, I will punch back scenario, and while again, don't personally believe in that kind of mentality, I can see why people would come to that conclusion, and I understand what's the logic and motivation behind this behavior.
If SJWs are bad because they spend too much time whining and don't talk about real problems, then why aren't you talking about those problems instead of just whining about the other people over and over and over for literally years?
Roll it again.
Why don't you seem as concerned with actual feminist theory in academia as you are with wrecking people for views?
I don't know, because maybe feminist theory is so BS that I could literally debunk most of it with a YouTube video.
Since so many of you profess to be admirers of second-wave feminism as opposed to third-wave feminism, I thought it would be interesting to ask which second-wave feminists in particular do you appreciate?
I'm sorry, Steve, I wasn't exactly alive at the time when the second wave feminism was booming, and even if I was in the wrong country, so this thing went way over my head. Now it's just a legend to me.
Why is trying and failing to debunk a study into sexual assault the #1 priority for a rational thinker now?
Have you made a YouTube video detailing in detail, in meticulous detail, how come their attempt at disassembling this study is a failure? If you haven't, then I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to move right along because you have nothing to stand on. And we do, in fact, have a disassembly of it.
One of the major arguments that I see in many of your videos is that it is possible to separate criticism of the religion of Islam from the actual Muslim people. And yet, this line seems to be crossed very often. I see things like raghead or camel fucker or other things like that in your comment sections.
A one-liner comment does not an argument make.
I see people taking very serious shots at Muslims in videos and hangouts.
And are they taking these shots because the people in question are Muslims, or are they taking these shots because the people in question are wrong?
So my question is this: why should a person of conscience who is concerned about the Muslim people and their community not being harmed or mistreated, why should they believe that you're actually only attempting to look at the ideas and talk about the ideas if you ignore bigotry that's occurring right in front of you?
Perhaps they are better trying to understand the culture and mindset of the Muslim people before addressing and shutting up those bigots. Because for all they know, they may themselves be wrong, or the bigots may actually be right in what they're saying, and in that case, it would be good to have some actual understanding of the subject, because you will then not have to go back on your own words and therefore not look like a complete twat. And yes, you could make the argument that, oh, I did wrong, I learned, but there will still be some people who are gonna call you a hypocrite because you changed your mind. I'm not saying there's a lot of them, but it's probably a form of risk mitigation to learn first, take shots later.
And in that light, would you be willing to break bread and salt with moderate Muslim people on your videos, have hangouts, invite them to your channels, just in order to build some bridges there and to learn more about what they think and how they feel and what their experience has been, so that information and knowledge can be furthered?
Oh, I absolutely would. There's only this one tiny issue of the rest of the Muslims, you know, the majority of them that aren't actually moderate. Yet these guys are kind of the problem. They would probably do their best to find me and kill me simply because I do not agree with their oppressive religion. And this isn't something even fringe. This is in the freaking book, in the holy book!
Do you deny that systemic racism against black people is like a thing in general? If not, why is it so much more important to you to demonize groups like Black Lives Matter than to actually use your platforms to discuss actual solutions to issues surrounding race and racism?
Okay, I'm not exactly denying that there may be some bias in it, but it's definitely not as bad as they portray it. I mean, the way you guys seem to put it is that if a white man shoots a black guy in the face and a cop goes and arrests that white person, he can just say, "Oh, Mr. Cop, but I'm a racist, and them's be niggers." Oh, okay, then you're free to go. But when the other black guy now suddenly is afraid for his life and attacks the white person so he doesn't get shot, then the cop suddenly pulls out a machine gun and guns down the black person until there's nothing left of them but Swiss cheese. But to actually answer your question, we do have solutions. I mean, if you've been to any libertarian channel and actually asked what to do about the freaking cops killing people left and right, then you would know. Have body cameras. Make people accountable for their actions. If a cop shoots a person, if there's no justification for it, black or white, then have them sacked. Have them fined beyond repair. Stop using so much lethal equipment. And most of all, train cops not to be excessively violent. You do not need a machine gun for a domestic dispute. If somebody tries to attack an officer, punch them, tase them, cuff them, but don't punch them, shoot 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 them, and ask if they want to be cuffed now. We already have solutions. About Black Lives Matter, from everything I've heard, they've been doing nothing but performing violent demonstration. They're ruining people's lives over something that is basically a non-issue. And we already have solutions to this, they just aren't getting implemented because of the authoritarian government. Oh, but this is a universal solution and not a race-focused one, so of course you're gonna freaking ignore it.
If you've ever discussed or done a video about black on black crime, when are you going to do a video about white on white crime and what we, as white people, can do to solve the problems in our community?
Because the white on white crime is not as big of an issue as black on black crime, and we should be focusing on reducing crime in general, rather than, you know, only focusing on one race. The black on black crime is the highlight of our videos oftentimes. I haven't actually made anything, but I imagine it would be the highlight of our videos because we want to draw attention that it exists. This is something we should be focusing on by your own logic, and that you guys keep ignoring.
Why is a literal teenager's different definition of racism from you so horrifying that you all have to go, "No! No, we have to stop him! We've got to debunk him now!" Ah!
Imagine if we redefined racism to when niggers hate white people. When you define a crime or attitude, it should be universal. As in, it should be something that applies to anyone who does it, regardless of their gender, or sexuality, or skin color, or anything. Imagine if we had a law that said that it's illegal, actually, well, more illegal, for men to kill oh wait, shit, that's femicide. So you're basically asking why we disagree with the idea that Aryans should be exempt from murder laws.
Wherever did you get the idea that racism was a self-applied identity?
Because racism is not an identity. Oh my god, seriously. It's an attitude. You cannot identify as a racist. I mean, what kind of heritage do racists have? Furthermore, you cannot simply declare someone to be racist and then they suddenly become racist. This is something that you have to do by yourself, and then you are identified, as in people know by your actions that you are a racist. You cannot just say, "Oh, I'm a racist," but I still treat white and black and yellow and red people equally. And when I said identify, I meant in the same way that we identify, for example, oxygen atoms. We have to do it by the way they behave and their properties. We cannot just tell a nitrogen atom that it's a racist and suddenly... we cannot tell a nitrogen atom that it's an oxygen atom and suddenly it starts sustaining chemical reactions. Sure, we can force atoms to transition into molecules through chemical reactions, but again, this has to be forced, this has to be induced, this has to be taking advantage of their properties, and not just declaring them to suddenly exist.
You often say that you are for equality of opportunity, but if people of color, for instance, have to overcome barriers whites do not, such as discrimination and unequal treatment, as are well documented in various studies, then how can the current situation be thought of as equal opportunity in any real way? And why do you consider it racist to discuss these issues?
I'm sorry, this is one question I don't have an answer to. I simply don't know enough about this subject.
You know, if I say this cat is pretty, I don't mean that all other cats aren't pretty. Like, do you really not get why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter is not only racially insensitive, but just patently ridiculous?
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I say all cats are pretty, and I may be a little biased because I'm a cat, if I say all cats are pretty, what validity is there to your claim that I am ignoring this pretty cat that you just pointed out? I mean, I just said that all cats are pretty, and that includes the cat in question, and yet you're acting like I said that I'm the only pretty cat around here.
Isn't it offensive to men to assume that a man could only ever want equality for women?
I fucking dare you to go to the honey badgers and ask them what happens to them when they try to advocate for men's rights. Oh, also, roll this thing again!
If you say you're an egalitarian, will you call out the man-hating slurs that you see coming from people within your community? People who use terms like cuck, beta male, faggot, or mangina? All of these things basically distill men down into thinking that the most important thing about them is to be having sex with a woman.
Enough of them, and I tell them to get in my belly. Because it's very ignorant of them to assume that people would only ever want to be laid with women. There are such things as fetishes, you know.
What is the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of dislikes, the number of retweets, the number of subscribers, any of those numbers, any of those metrics, what have they got to do with the argument?
Nothing, but they are kind of a measure of how successful an argument is.
Deepak Chopra, for example, a man who trots out an endless stream of pseudoscientific quantum woo bollocks, has nearly 3 million followers. Those people follow him because he tells them what they want to hear. Why even mention the number of followers you have? What difference does it make?
Oh, I see what your point is. You see, it's also a measure of how many people stand against the opposing idea. I mean, if I'm an anti-feminist and I have 5 million subscribers, that means that 5 million people are against feminism. If there's so many people against you, perhaps you should consider if you're wrong on something.
Why is it that you go on and fucking on about safe spaces and trigger warnings and delicate little flowers, but continue to hide behind your cartoon avatars and your childish pseudonyms?
Because, just like with Muslims, you people are gonna be relentless in ruining my life. How many times do I have to repeat that? Anonymity is the only thing we have to defend ourselves from real-life attacks. If we do not have anonymity, we do not have the guarantee of safety. And without that guarantee of safety, how can we be sure that we will be able to make any arguments the next day? How do we know you aren't gonna, for example, burn my house down to the ground? Or call the cops on me for hate speech. Oh, and also there's the factor that if we use a cartoon animal as an avatar, then you don't know our gender, then you don't know our race, and you cannot dismiss us based on that. You actually have to attack our, as you call it, racist, sexist, homophobic, bigoted rhetoric.
Are you willing to publicly acknowledge and admonish the massive amount of hatred, bullying, harassment, and intimidation that a lot of your fans infringe upon people?
Yes, we are, but we are also not responsible for those actions. We cannot force our fans to attack someone. Hell, we can at best request it, and it's up to them if they listen.
Why do you find it so hard to believe that feminists are being harassed online?
Okay, I'm blocking you on Twitter, and that's the actual answer. Okay, I'm not blocking you on Twitter because I don't know who you are.
Do you understand the key importance of reproducibility and repeatability in scientific research? That simply going to Google Scholar, doing a 30-second search for keywords and pulling out the first paper you find that backs up your stance is not a particularly credible way to do research.
Okay, I'm sorry, Skeptic, but I'm gonna steal your joke. Oh wait, that's not very libertarian. No.
If you identify as an egalitarian, then I'm interested in your take on the usefulness of the concept of the original position as laid out by John Rawls in his theory of justice.
If you aren't even gonna briefly explain the idea behind this theory, then I'm not gonna have any point to start off on. I'm not an academic, goddammit.
As a supporter, as a proponent of freedom of speech, why do you want to quash academic freedom? If If you're not familiar with the concept of academic freedom, it's worth, in the UK at least, looking up the 1988 Education Reform Act and seeing what that says about the rights of academics to put across unpopular opinions.
For the same reason we don't want creationism to be taught as a science.
Why are you so obsessed with Anita Sarkeesian?
Why is she so obsessed with men in video games?
Do you really think you can spend your entire life in a perpetual state of emotional immaturity?
No, which is why I challenge people, and then I challenge myself on those challenges, and why I expect challenges from other people.